I came across a couple of interesting examples of how translations handle metaphors or figures of speech, perhaps, and they illustrate the kind of decisions that a translation has to make. In Peter's confession, Jesus says, "Who do people say that I am? And who do you say that I am?" Peter says that you're Messiah. And he says, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, since flesh and blood has not revealed to you," and has revealed this to you, "but my Father, the one in heaven." And notice how sarx and haima are translated. In the ESV, they keep flesh and blood, and they keep the verb active. In the NIV, however, they still maintain the imagery of flesh and blood because they figure it was completely understandable. I'm not sure why they put it into the passive. They may have felt it would be easier to process flesh and blood if it wasn't the subject of the verb. I don't know. But look at the NLT. "You did not learn this from any human being." In other words, they completely remove the imagery. And I don't think that's a good thing. As long as the imagery is understandable, I think we should keep the imagery. Scripture is literature, and it's deep and it's rich. And when you get rid of metaphors, when you get rid of images, and you just try to translate nothing but meaning, almost prosaic meaning, I think it really lowers the quality and the perception of the value of literature. So I can see why they're doing it. It's consistent with their philosophy, but I don't like it. Later on in verse 23, when Peter gets himself in trouble, Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a scandalon to me." And I found this interesting. The ESV went more with an interpretive position and said hindrance, and the NIV is a little more physical and said stumbling block. Again, look what the NLT does. "You're a dangerous trap for me." So completely interpreting the imagery. NIV is keeping the imagery, and the ESV is interpreting the imagery a little bit. But the thing that really stood out to me was because you are not thinking, and phroneo has the idea of to set your mind on something. I actually remember doing this in the ESV, and this was my suggestion. It's kind of fun to see that. But I said, you are not setting your mind on ta to theou, the of God, but the of men. So it's the ta is making this into a noun clause. So it's the of God, but what? Well, the ESV properly kept it very broad, the things of God and not the things of man. I wasn't as happy with the NIV translation because it narrows it, the concerns of God. Well, I think Peter's mindset was not just human concerns. I think it was broader than that. And I think that this limits it a bit. Over in the NLT, a human point of view, not from God's point of view. Again, this is a pretty generic construction. And I think the translation should keep it. But you can see what's going on in all of these translations. And again, these translations have different translation philosophies. They're being consistent with the philosophy. But it's just a good illustration of that. But there was another thing that really struck me as I was looking at this, and that is this whole flesh and blood stuff. How did Peter come to understand that Jesus was the Messiah? Did he figure it out? Did he do his exegesis? Did he interpret Old Testament prophecy? No. It was the God, through the work of the Spirit, that revealed it to him. And I found myself wondering today how far we've come in our current educational model, where we apply the historical critical method and we kind of come to the meaning of a text. But where's God in the process? Where is prayer? Where do we open our hearts to the Spirit to help us understand the meaning of the text? Where's the doctrine of illumination, in other words? I think we need to really look at this question. Because if Peter can't figure out after a year and a half or so of walking with Jesus that he's the Messiah, but it takes divine revelation for him to understand that, I wonder how much we need illumination to really understand what the text means. Don't get me wrong, I believe in exegesis, I believe in Greek and Hebrew exegesis, but I also believe that spiritual things are taught by the Spirit at truly deep spiritual levels. And I think we need to look at how we do our Bible studies in our Sunday schools, our small groups, our sermons, and our seminary education, and ask ourselves, are we giving room for God to teach us spiritual truths?